Be seated, kiddos. Let's go on down to Children's Church. Wonderful time down there. Look forward to that, and thank you for being in here to help us worship as we sing together. Always a wonderful thing to see this number of kids come down. And a word on that, parents, thank you for trusting us with your kids. Thanks for bringing these kids here. I had the great privilege of growing up in a church that loved kids from the womb on, if you will. And that makes a huge difference when parents bring their children to church and when they come with their children and when the church is able to reach into the lives of children. So thank you very much. Today we're going to get a preview of where we're going next year. As I mentioned, this evening we're going to be talking about the plan for the year. Where are we headed and what does that look like? And we mentioned that a couple months ago as we thought about where we were headed. Today I want to recap that a little bit as we think about what it means to continue in these verses that focus on the unforced rhythms of grace. What does that look like? And so throughout 2019, both past and now continuing on for the next 2 months, we've been focusing on this idea of come to me. Jesus' invitation to come to me. For those who are tired, for those who are weary, burned out on religion, these people, would you please come to me? And I want us to go to those verses as we remind ourselves of that truth that we speak of. This is Matthew chapter 11 in the Message, beginning in verse 28. It says this: "Are you tired, worn out, burned out of religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." As we think about this passage this morning, I want you to notice again these ideas that come from the text. The first one being come to me, and it's with intention that he spoke these words first, and it's with intention that we focused on them first because we cannot do anything until we have come first to him. We cannot accomplish anything in his name, nor will we live to the point that we are supposed to live in our call in our own lives unless we come to Jesus. In other words, before we're going to be working for him, before we're going to be learning more from him, we must put ourselves in his care. And so I don't want us to move too quickly from that. I want us to, again, think about what that means to place your life into the hands of Jesus before we move forward. And then we will move forward from this, and for the next year, 2020, we're going to focus on another set of words we find in this, as in now has come to me. In 2020, it's going to be this idea of work with me. What does it look like to work with Jesus? What does it mean to actually engage in life with Jesus? What does it look like to step up to the plate for Jesus? What does it look like to actually say, I am going to live this day and this week and this month and this year for Jesus? Well, to help us do that, I want us to go to the NIV version of the text I just read. Because in the NIV, you're going to find an image that made a lot of sense to the first century Christian. We can use our imaginations as we will this morning, but most of us are not agrarian people. In other words, most of us, for our livelihood, don't farm, and we don't have to go out and plow fields. You may have a habit of that. You may live in the valley and do that occasionally, but most of us are not these kind of people. And so we have to use our imagination. But we find in this text an image that we can grasp, and we'll give you a picture to go along with it as well. But listen to Matthew chapter 11, 29 through 30 in the NIV. It says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I want you to look at this picture of a yoke similar to ones they would have used in the first century. Mainly for oxen. This was the beast of burden for them as they carried their own burdens as well. And you'll notice that there are two places for those to pull by their necks and by their strength. In other words, there are always two oxen in this plowing process. And this is what Jesus had in mind when he said, "Take my yoke upon you." Now, he actually had a dual meaning with this. You and I know what this is like. We have dual meaning when we speak words, and sometimes they have multiple meanings, and this would have been the case with Jesus. He's talking to agrarian society, and so they would have known what it was to work the fields. And so very much we take this as a literal word of take my yoke. As in Jesus is saying, look upon the fields. He always used nature to express and just everyday things, everyday ordinary things. Jesus used these to teach. And so they would have been able to picture oxen plowing the field. But also an idea that did not originate with Jesus, but originated with the Jewish rabbis, the teachers of the law. They referred to the Hebraic law as a yoke. As a yoke. In other words, this is what you're going to put around you through life. And this was the focus on law. Now, if you recall, those of you that were here for the last several months, we went through the book of Galatians. And Paul emphasizes in the book of Galatians, the overarching theme of Galatians is it is about grace and not law. It is about grace and not law. Jesus is the one who presents this first. Not Paul, not Peter, but first Jesus. And he does this in this passage, which is why the Message translates this, are you tired, are you weary, are you burned out on religion? In other words, is this law become a hindrance to you? And I don't mean hindrance in the sense of you're wanting to break the law, but a hindrance in the sense I don't find any connection, relational connection with my God because I'm too worried about obeying all of the rules. Obeying all of the rules. Maybe you've been in a situation like this in your workplace or even in a relationship where you lost the sense of connection relationally or emotionally, and all you did was sit there and think about, am I following this rule? Am I dotting my I's and crossing my T's? You know that term we talk about? This is the idea where the law becomes a burden. And Jesus is allowing this reprieve from this oppressive use of the law. The oppressive use of the law. So I want us to think about the second sense of this in the law as we hear from a man named Craig Bloomberg. He says this, like the yoke that couples oxen together, discipleship does not exempt one from work, but makes it manageable. Jews commonly spoke of taking on the yoke of the Torah to refer to the acceptance of the stipulations of the law. Stipulations of the law. Put the yoke upon you, the law. Now, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, as we say. There was some intentionality with this, and that started in a good place. If you read the Old Testament, as I encourage you to do, you find that God forms a people. And in order to raise up a people who are different than the culture they've been in for 400 years, the Egyptian culture with slavery as their only life, God sends them out on a journey that they mess up, but he continues to be with them. And in the midst of this journey, he provides laws as a gift. He says, here's how you run a culture. Here's how you treat one another. Here's how you deal with injustice. Here's how you deal with one another if one harms the other. Here are the things that you do if you want to honor me. These are wonderful gifts. Think about it, parents. If you have a child and you tell that child nothing about life, you just say, good luck. Good luck. That child has no chance. You must teach your children, this is appropriate, this is not appropriate. This is hot, this is cold. These are words you should say, these are words you should not say. These are things you should do with your sister. These are things you shouldn't do in meanness to your sister. These are ways you should treat your parents. These are ways you should not treat your parents. This is the way you should treat your teacher. These are ways you should not treat your teacher. And so I want you to think about this. This is the kind of idea God's going for in the law. My children, I'm trying to teach you. But then it all became about laws. It all became about laws. Perhaps you had those teachers. I know I did. I go back over my years of education. And think about those teachers that were teaching just because they knew nothing else. And they should have retired years ago. Anybody have one of those teachers? Don't raise your hand. If the teacher's in the room, please don't raise your hand. But you know those teachers, they should have hung it up a long time ago. They're just in there handing out the same tests and the same homework, and they don't care what person's on the page. They just grade it and don't worry about it. But then you have those teachers who are engaged with you, those who are willing to stay a little later and help you with your assignments, those who said, I'll give you a second chance, those you could just see the excitement when they taught you American literature. Or for some reason, those who get excited about math, I don't get that. But some people just really get excited about algebraic equations and chemistry and these things. Count me out. But you know those teachers who just love it, and they almost make you love it, even though you have no idea what you're learning yet. And this is what God is doing. He's saying, this is exciting, folks. Come along with this journey. And sooner or later, these teachers just begin to hand out the same exams. And didn't care anything for the Jewish people they were leading. They just said, as long as we're grading these papers, as long as they're following us, as long as they just make it through, then we're doing our job. And Jesus comes into this situation and breaks his heart. And so we find this idea of the yoke being actually the burden of a beast. I want you to hear from Doug Webster on this. He's got a wonderful passage dealing with this idea of yoke. He says the surprising promise of the easy yoke was meant to free us from a self-serving, meritorious, performance-based religion. Let me rephrase that or say that again. Self-serving, meritorious, performance-based religion. I've talked with many of you, and many of you know what it's like to grow up in that kind of religion. Meritorious. In other words, I've got to earn my way in this. Or am I good? Am I not so good? Is my list of goods better than my list of ills? This is the kind of religion Jesus doesn't want. It is easy in that it frees us from the burden of self-centeredness, liberates us from the load of self-righteousness, and frees us to live in the way that God intended us to live. The easy yoke sounds like an oxymoron. Plowing a field or pulling a load is hard work. And nowhere does Jesus promise soft ground for tilling or level paths for bearing the load. What he does promise is a relationship with himself. The demands are great, but the relationship with Jesus makes the burden light. The relationship with Jesus makes the burden light. Now, some of you are dealing with confusion or self-doubt or sickness or relational difficulties or cancer or difficulties in your life that you didn't see coming or things you've been dealing with for years. And one thing you might hear from people who are falsely presenting the gospel is, you come to me and life will be easy. Come to me and all things will go well. Come to me and you will be happy. This is not the message of the gospel. We live, remember folks, in a Genesis 3 world. We live in a broken world. And so by putting on the yoke next to your Lord Jesus Christ, pulling this together, it is not going to be the yellow brick road. We all know that. If you've lived longer than a year or two, you know life is difficult. We could spend all of today going around the room and talking about the difficulties that we have. Some of you are heavily burdened this morning. Some things are on you, and they've been on you. I hear this on a regular basis. I talk to some of you, and I talk to other friends, and we hear about the things that are on us. And some of the things you've never talked about, and they wear you down. And this is something that Jesus is inviting you to bring to him. He's not inviting you to bring it to him so all go away. He's inviting you on this journey as he can help you through it. He can help you through it. It's something that is going to lift you up. Now, Ron, I'm gonna point you out here in a minute. He preached several weeks ago, did a great job, brother. That's awesome. And one of the things I heard as I listened to the sermon, and many people commented on, he said, some mountains don't move. Some mountains don't move. Now, with faith, you can move a mountain, but some mountains aren't going to move. And some of you have mountains that aren't moving. And maybe that mountain's not going to move. But what does Jesus do? He walks with you. He helps you with it. And so that's the idea of how come with me, Jesus invites you, helps you prepare to work with him. Now, Jesus had brothers, and one of his brothers was named James. And James, the book of James in the New Testament, is not written by the disciple James, a separate James. It's written by his brother. Now, if you recall, Jesus' brothers thought he was crazy at one point. You might too, if your sibling did some of the things Jesus did. and said things about themselves that Jesus said about himself. Only difference is what he said about himself was true. But his brothers thought he was crazy. They thought they'd try to save him from himself. That's why Jesus said, my mother, my brothers are those who follow me. Biology had nothing to do with it. It was who was working with Jesus. And we find a massive transformation in the life of James. And he becomes a leader of the church, and he becomes a great disciple of, not only brother of, but disciple or student or follower of Jesus Christ. And he ends up writing an entire book, and his focus is on this idea of working with the Lord. You're familiar with the verse, many of you. It is that great faith without works is dead. He's not saying that we earn our way, but if you have faith, you got to work too. Not to earn anything, but it's a natural flow. If you have faith, you will work for the Lord. That's how it works. And that's James's point. I want you to hear the introduction to his book for us to understand this as we prepare for this journey together. James chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. He says this: I, James, am a slave of God and the Master Jesus, writing to the 12 tribes scattered to kingdom come. Hello. Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. Come again? Did I read that correctly? I think I did. Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so that you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. You'll get his help and won't be condescended on when you ask for it. Ask boldly, believingly, without a second thought. People who worry their prayers are like wind-whipped waves. Don't think you're going to get anything from the Master that way, adrift at sea, keeping all your options open. I want to focus on two sentences there for a minute, and I just love these sentences. He says, he loves to help. You'll get his help and won't be condescended on when you ask for it. You won't be condescended on when you ask for it. Now, there may be questions that are foolishly asked, but Jesus doesn't hold that against us. He wants to reach out to you. He wants to help you. He didn't say, come to me without meaning. He didn't invite you for a journey and say, well, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to condescend upon you, Jesus says. I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to help you through this. But you got to believe. You got to trust me. You got to believe that I'm going to truly help you, and so you can have your true colors shine. This is the idea of work. So now let's go back to this idea of the yoke. How do these fit together? Well, if I'm going to work well with Jesus, I need to understand what he means when he says that he has come to complete the law. Because we don't want to confuse what Jesus is saying here. He's not saying I'm throwing it all out. He's saying I'm bringing it back to its true purpose. I want you to hear a man named Sherman Johnson on this. He says this. He says, Jesus' yoke was a simple following of the Old Testament law, as interpreted by him in a prophetic and non-technical spirit. And the emphasis was on justice, mercy, and love. Justice, mercy, and love. Old Testament prophet Micah understood what this was. Jesus understood what this was. His followers understood what this was. Matthew chapter 22. A man comes to Jesus. He says, Jesus, what's the most important thing? How do I live this life? What is the bare minimum? And depending on the gospel account, one gives us a sense that this man is kind of sneaky. Another one senses that he's a very passionate seeker. Regardless, it's a good question. And what he says is this in reply. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And love your neighbor as you love yourself. This is the simple following of the Old Testament law. This is a non-meritorious following of the law. This is the one that cannot lead to self-righteousness. Hold that. You see, if we take a checklist of the Old Testament and say, I didn't do this, all those shalt nots, I didn't do them, and all those shalls, I did them, that can lead to self-righteousness, which we saw in the teachers of the law in the first century. But if we are judging ourselves, and I mean that in a good sense here, if we're judging ourselves on are we loving God and are we loving neighbor, there's no sense of self-righteousness there. It's just, am I doing it or am I not doing it? And he's saying you don't compare. It's not do I love God better than you love God, or do I love my neighbor better than you love your neighbor. It's my call and your call is to love our God, the one true God, with everything we have, all-encompassing, holistic love for God. And we are to be loving our neighbors, those that literally live next door to us and those across the sea. And so this next year in 2020, we're going to focus on work with me, the invitation of Jesus, through which we're going to discover the unforced rhythms of grace. And all this is going to be balanced on and placed upon and built upon this idea that Jesus presented as the ultimate summary and fulfillment of the Old Testament law. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. That is our focus all next year, is are we working with Jesus in loving our God and loving our neighbor? We're not going to complicate it. We're going to look at it and see what are ways that we love God and what are ways that we love our neighbor. Now, to help us look forward to some of the things, I want to share with you some things we're going to do as a church next year together. And we're going to talk about some of these tonight as well. And this takes part through three ways. You hear me say this often. When you pray, when you go, when you give, you are accomplishing the things that Rabbit Creek Church is called to do. So, for example, when you pray, when you go, and when you give, here's some things that you're accomplishing. We're going to be doing work among people, spreading the gospel and helping them holistically in Mexico and in Cambodia and in Florida. Those are three of our planned trips this next coming year. We're going to continue to reach out in our community through Greg Monrad, one of our members who helps lead and is the director of the Community Pregnancy Center. We're going to walk alongside those who are having unexpected pregnancies and encourage them to take God's choice. Keep that baby. Raise that baby. We're going to help the hungry in our city through the Church of the Nations ministry, supported for years, and the Downtown Hope Center, helping people know what it is to actually have food in their bellies and the gospel presented to them. We're going to do that together. We're going to see our children taught on a weekly basis as you volunteer and we come together and raise our children in the Lord. We're going to have a thriving student ministry as we do, as we see the teenagers connect and young adult ministry that continues. I'm so happy to report over the last several years at our church, we've seen a wonderful thing happen. Often in our church years past, as youth would go through youth group and then disappear, and we see very few of them as they enter that young adult stage. And now our number of young adults is increasing because we are engaging our teens with our overall church and things are happening. And so, folks, we have the small children you saw run down there and those with diapers over there, and we have senior adults and everything in between. And we praise God for that. And you're investing in that when you pray and when you give. We are also going to be continuing to lead people in worship as they have done for us this morning. And we're reaching out through our campus ministries. And we're going to engage here in our state. Exciting things are going on. Our sermons are watched at Cold Bay every week. We praise God, a place where they have very little ministry, that we're able to engage in that ministry. We're developing a ministry with Northway Village, just south of Tok, all the way over there near Canada. And they have people who love the Lord and have no people there serving them. And we're going to be a part of that. Josh has been in connection with the president of the village, basically, and the head of the school district. And they said, come on in. We're ready to receive your help. And we want to go alongside them as we help each other. And that's going to be an exciting time. We are reaching into our world. You notice I said Florida and Mexico and Cambodia and right here in our own state. We are doing this to the glory of God. And I want you to know that we are doing this. We're doing this through life groups. We're doing this through all these things weeks to week. And then I want to make sure that you mark your calendar for one specific date next year. Some of you recall the first time we did this, it was on a May 17th. And so happens this year that Sunday is falling on May 17th again. And May 17th, 2020 is our Go Out and Serve Sunday. So what we're going to do is gather here as we have in years past, and we come and meet here and have a pep rally of sorts, and then we'll go out in the community focused around life group ministries and other ministries, and we're going to go out and serve other people. And so we're going to do that right here in our own city, and that's May 17th. Write that down and be here, May 17th. Don't skip that Sunday just because we're not doing normal things. Show up that Sunday. Put it on your calendar. I'm going to do the pastoral thing here, and some of you skipped last year, 2 years ago. Don't skip. May 17th. Mark it on your calendar. Make sure you're here. We're going to go out and serve this community May 17th. And what better year to do that when we're talking about work with me? It's a wonderful time. So that's just a preview. That's where we're headed. You want to discover the unforced rhythms of grace? You want to know what it means to work with Jesus? Get on board with Rapid Creek Church this next year, and we're going to do that to the glory of God. Josh, come on up. We're going to sing. What are we going to sing? You know what we're going to sing? I don't know what we're going to sing. Maybe the booth knows what we're going to sing. I put you on the spot, brother. I'm sorry.
Just as I am.
Who was there that Sunday? If you want to know the story of Just As I Am, talk to me later. One of the worst things ever between the two of us. So, you want to sing it?
No.
Christ is enough. That's enough. Christ is enough. I'm done. Let's stand. Let's sing.